Hi guys, Maverick veteran here. What we're going to talk about today? Well, EU military unification is our main subject, which is something that I've been working on now for nearly 6 years. But the gentleman that I've got with me this evening has been working on it a hell of a lot longer than that. But we've got into the routine over the last 3 or 4 years of speaking probably twice, 3 times a week, and keeping each other up to date on everything there is to know with it. If you'd like to share this and it's not possible to share it from the group page that you're on, please feel free to share it either from Maverick Veteran on YouTube or my own timeline, which is Simon Bean. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives. David.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Indeed. Yeah. We're going to have a good look at this bit of news that's been drifted out via the mail and these sources from within the MOD talking about our armoured divisions and our tanks. And then we're going to sort of go into the sort of whys and wherefores of what we're really involved with here. So just as a general, so people get it, if you've not up on this subject, I'll just try and do it really, really quickly. So what the EU wants to do is unify all of the military in Europe, and that currently includes Britain, because the defence and security arrangements in Defence Union are separate to Brexit. They're included and then excluded. There are 2 separate strands to it. So whilst it's woven through the future deal and the future treaty, like some kind of perverse DNA that no politician seems to be able to understand because the language is not plain English, that you've got to sort of just focus on one fundamental. We think we're leaving, but it does not, as it stands at the moment, unless there is a pushback and a proper fight and a challenge made, include our defence industry or our military. Her Majesty's Armed Services, lock, stock, and all Her Majesty's barrels, from boots to nukes. It's everything. Now, Ursula von der Leyen has already stated in terms, now bearing in mind, everyone, she's the former German defence minister, and she's been on a drive in that ministry in Germany for military unification for quite some time. So we've got this contradiction that, you know, Mr. Trump saying about we need more money from Germany and we're not happy about that. Well, why would they pay into NATO when they knew full well that they were going to be running a different pan-EU system of defence union? But what everybody's got to understand is that she stated in terms now now she's president of the EU Commission, that she wants one single European defence contractor. So what does that mean for all of the companies currently in the defence arena in Europe, including Britain, for all of those jobs and contracts and everything? So we're down to only a handful of companies in Britain now that do anything in defence, not many. Let's say there's half a dozen, give or take. And those, if we carry on, we will end up with none. Because the EU will appoint the defence contractor and they only want one. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar, as they're appointing it, as they consolidate and unify all of those companies along with the military itself, that the chances are that that will be a German company. And I'm going to just stress that, the chances are, and it will not be a British company, it will not be BAE, it will not be Rolls-Royce, it will not be Babcock. Okay, so we're seeing now the beginnings of this revelation with them saying that they're going to get rid of our armour. So Simon, you're the expert on British armour. If they take the armour away, and that's if, because if there isn't a challenge now, if there isn't somebody stand up and go no, yeah, where does that leave the British Army without armour? Or, let's put it the other way, the ability to make armour.
If we go back, first Gulf War, so 1990, the troops readied themselves, moved out to the Middle East. I know that many of the people viewing would have been there, along with myself. Challenger, and it was the first Mark, so it was Challenger 1, was out on the ground, and it had the most elite armor anywhere in the world. It was called Chobham. It was actually made in a place called Cobham, hence the name. That's really a project name. It's a composite armor, basically. Still top secret to these days. Now, that armor has since gone out to the US, to Germany, and to the rest of NATO. So everybody is now using Cobham armor. And it's still virtually impenetrable compared to standard armors that would have been used prior to Challenger. Now, during the first Gulf War, obviously that was a big tank battle, because tanks are brilliant in desert regions, because it all goes by line of sight to some degree. But nowadays, tanks are so technologically advanced that they can fire as well at night as they can in the day. And you only have to get a heat signature show up on your equipment within the turret of the tank, and you can engage that target from 2 or 3 kilometers away. So it was a war-winning piece of equipment during 1990 and 91. It's still a war-winning piece of equipment. It not only takes out other tanks, it takes out other equipments, it takes out hardened bunkers, it takes out troops that are settled in one RV, let's say, so a concentration of soldiers. And you can take those out quite easily just by varying the type of ammunition that you want to use within the gun itself, which is currently 120 millimeters, which is almost twice the size of caliber that we saw during World War II. So they're big, hefty things. Without tanks protecting ground troops in the desert or in urban areas, we're pretty much screwed, David. That's the bottom line.
So bottom line, all right, are we talking about if they take the armor away and then the ability to make it, because that'll go with it? If you haven't got it, then why would you want any? There's no defense contract. There's no money flowing into a company making stuff. You know, and a lot of this stuff I was involved with in the Midlands, so I know a lot of the guys that used to make stuff for Challenger. You know, so if you take that out, where does that leave the British Army? You know, how would you phrase that? Without armor, what is the British Army?
Well, that pretty much puts us down the bottom of the peggings, doesn't it? Because we were.
Are we an army in name only?
I think we probably are an army in name only. And if this comes true that they put in the Daily Mail today, that they're going to scrap all our tanks or put them into light care and preservation and only dragged out in time of war, well, that in itself takes manpower. That costs money. They still have to be maintained. For as long as they're in light care and pres, they're not getting updated necessarily. So it creates a massive issue. And we could end up, David, with Germany having a higher number of armored vehicles, main battle tanks, than us. And that hasn't happened ever, because immediately after World War I and the Versailles Treaty came in, Germany was banned from any form of military production. Well, now, of course, if we get rid of ours, the Germans aren't getting rid of theirs.
Well, exactly.
But they will overtake.
I mean, it's like someone's got the let's reduce the nuclear weapons concept to let's just reduce Britain to not having any weapons. You know, no tanks, no air. You know, I mean, where do we get? What's next? You know, they're going to say to the RAF, "Well, you don't need any planes. You know, you don't need that. We're going to go with hybrid warfare or cyber warfare." Oh, and the Royal Navy. Well, you don't need any ships anymore, do you? That's all a load of nonsense. Yeah, this is the direction of travel. So I've got to say, this is really, really serious. It's really, really worrying, because we've seen a lot of these capital assets taken out before, where they've taken some of it, okay, and there hasn't been the resistance. And we can talk about how the chiefs of staff and the officers have been really stripped of their power since Henry Leach and Llewellyn and Fieldhouse had a go in '82. That system doesn't work anymore. They're not allowed to do that.
I think nowadays our functioning senior officers,
they don't function.
They don't function.
They don't function as senior
They're
officers.
literally following orders from the civil servants or the civil serpents, as I call them.
Absolutely, the script comes from Lovegrove.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably the point to talk about it now. When Lovegrove took over at the MOD, he gave a speech at the Institute for Government. So we'll probably, if we'll tag that up subsequent to the broadcast. It's worth having a look at, because in that speech, Lovegrove talks about the policy from government, all right, i.e. the civil servants, the bureaucrats that sit in the cabinet office, the government. Yeah. And he articulates the entire schedule for the short term of what's going to happen in the MOD. So the task and the schedule is divulged in this speech. So the key thing to bear in mind, what I picked up on rapidly, was that they wanted to retrain everyone. So that made my ears prick up. I thought, well, is that going to be common purpose? And then he wanted to take out. So this is in 2017. I think he took over in 2016, and the speech was 2017, give or take that kind of time period. And he said he wanted to take out £20 billion from the capital defence budget over 10 years. So we're just going to see this tapering, this shortening of our national military position. You know, where it's tapering and shortening to unification, to a point where, you know, that it really, what it will be, it'll be nothing like what you knew when you were in. It would be a completely different thing if it's not held up.
Now, here's the thing here. We've got here Rheinmetall Defence, which is clearly a German company.
Yeah.
Rheinmetall all the way through the Second World War and were working for the Nazis, as were Kruppstahl. Now, the question was always asked, is Kruppstahl better than Stalininium? Was the question. Well, Stalininium was cheap and they made tanks in vast numbers, the T-34. So it was a winning piece of equipment. But there's no deniability that Kruppstahl and Rheinmetall belong to the Nazis. And it's worth noting, I think, that both these companies used Deutsche Bank as their money handler. And Deutsche Bank was also one of the main banks out of two. So the Reichsbank and Deutsche Bank, by the Nazi Party to, if you like, keep the books for all the gold, the art, and the money that was lifted by the Nazis as they were conquering mainland Europe. Now, what else do we know about Deutsche Bank, David? Can you think of anything?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, isn't it? You know, so who do we know? Who do we know in the MOD who's an ex-Deutsche Banker?
A what?
A Deutsche Banker.
Oh, a Deutsche Banker. Either works, I guess. Stephen Lovegrove.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Didn't he work for EU Media?
EU Media.
Within Deutsche Bank?
Mergers and acquisitions or something or other. Somebody like to nail that on the head. Could be grateful. Join the dots up, everyone. You know.
So if we join the dots and we look at Kruppstahl and Rheinmetall and the Deutsche Bank, and we can probably tie that up with a bit of video in a moment. Then great. Put the video on. We have this little thing forming, don't we? Which is
a big thing.
A bit of a concern, to be honest. Let's bung it on.
A video released today by Germany's Rheinmetall showed a tank with a 130mm turret besides a new hull front as part of its MBT Advanced Technologies competence demonstration, a possible indication of what will go into the future Main Ground Combat System, MGCS. The demo tank looks like the latest iteration of its advanced technology demonstrator for the British Army's Challenger 2 Life Extension Project, LEP. A joint venture was formed between Rheinmetall Defence UK, 55%, and BAE Systems Land UK, 45%, in 2019 to take forward the Challenger 2 LEP. A tweet accompanying the video said Rheinmetall's 130mm smoothbore technology for MBTs embodies a significant lethality leap in times of increasing threats. Combined with a state-of-the-art autoloader, this system is the latest evolvement in Rheinmetall's MBT Advanced Technologies competence. The 130mm smoothbore gun for MBTs is the most significant advancement in Western MBT design since World War II. Current NATO MBTs are built around the 120mm turret. The Russian Armata T-15 was the first to break away from the 120mm gun standard by being equipped with a 125mm turret offering significantly improved shooting performance over the 120mm guns of the current Leopard 2 and the UK's Challenger 2 MBT. The new 130mm turret, if accepted by the MCGS project, could mean a major change in NATO standard tank turret size. The video shows a projectile fired from the 130mm gun piercing through several layers of armored sheets. Besides, the tank moves at a fast pace through cross-country, indicating good mobility with the new gun in place. The hull front in the upgraded Leopard 2 is flatter compared to the current Leopard 2 tank. This may have been necessitated by requirement of armor and to accommodate the gun. Rheinmetall's Weapons and Ammunition Division launched a 130mm demonstrator program in 2015 to counter improvements in armor of enemy tanks and armored vehicles. The 130mm 51 Lira turret was first shown at Eurosat Ori event in 2016. Company executives had then commented that the increase in caliber would allow the firing of more lethal projectiles, effectively enhancing the gun's armor-piercing capacity by a factor of 2. Rheinmetall has also commenced developing a new 130mm armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot (APFSDS) round with elongated rod penetrator, which is supposed to be made of a new tungsten alloy. The new APFSDS round also features a semi-combustible cartridge case and new propellant. The 130mm smoothbore gun of Rheinmetall is also being considered as part of the modernization of the UK's Challenger S besides the US M1A1 Abrams MBTs.
Done.
Now, I think it's quite interesting there that they quote that this new upgrade to the tank, and that video is only 2 weeks old, by the way.
Doesn't that just fit perfectly with this?
Fits perfect, doesn't it? And it does make you wonder, you know, is this really about getting rid of the armour, or is it just about getting rid of the manufacturing within the UK and handing it over to Europe?
Well, let's just look at it, all right? So Rheinmetall and the Germans and the EU going for one defence contractor. So they want one tank for the whole of Europe, regardless of whatever, right?
Yeah, which is why they've said the Abrams, the Challenger 2 upgrade, and the Leopard 2 upgrade, which is the German tank, are all basically going to be the same caliber of gun, same turret, same everything.
They're standardising the guns, you know. It's a you know, I mean, so what we're talking about here is we give up on our armor, we give up on our ability to make any kind of armor, and then the Germans and the EU are going to make it all.
Because even though they said on there, David, that Rheinmetall will be responsible for 55% of it, and they've said Rheinmetall UK. Well, that's just a play on words, isn't it? Because Rheinmetall is a German company.
Oh, it's just that's just some sort of political appeasement, isn't it? So that nobody makes a fuss, isn't it?
And then they say BEA Systems will be responsible for the other 45% of the production. Well, didn't we sell that off to the Germans, the French, the Japanese, and God knows who not so long back?
Well, you'd need to be some kind of, global level forensic accountant to understand what's going on there. Yeah. I mean, it was said to me when I first started lobbying by one former head of the Navy, and that's going back some years now. So things are a lot worse. But they said to me in confidence that they viewed BAE as being literally like British Leyland, a state monster. It was horrific. It was late. It was on time. It was expensive. It wasn't terribly good. Gone are the days when we used to make really quick stuff before 1957, and we'd have it right, and it would go out, and we would then sell it, and it worked. But we've treaded this policy, and it's certainly not been an overt. It's been a covert policy, an overt policy of not doing defence on a national basis since 57. And I strongly suspect, looking at the top secret papers that I've seen from the Attlee government in 48, that the gambit was to do it on a pan-EU basis even then, and they were setting up and gearing for it. But obviously there was a subsequent Churchill government that followed on from Attlee.
Yes.
But you can see the defence spending go up under Churchill, and then it comes back down rapidly subsequent, where it's, we're at this point we are now where we don't function as a national military, and we don't function nationally to make anything anymore. That's the bit. We don't, what do we make in Britain? If we wanted to make our own aircraft, our own tank, our own ship, our own whatever, it could be a frying pan. All right.
Yep.
Let's say we wanted to make our own something, a car. Quite a good. We used to lead the world in that sort of stuff, didn't we?
Well, that's gone. We haven't got any car manufacturing, have we?
So you can join the dots up from coal and steel to cars to shipping to whatever. It was let's just rob Britain of everything, and now we're getting to the point where they're robbing us of our military, and our own politicians are letting it happen.
Now, we already know that Ursula von der Leyen, when she was still Secretary of State for Defence, if you like, for Germany, stated early last year that she wanted to top out on EU defence union. Do you think this is her topping out on this?
Well, remembering now, of course, that Germany's president, they've got a presidency in the EU now, and she's president of the Commission. So it's a double down in effect. The original gambit last year, when she stated this in terms that Farage and Widdecombe picked up on and then said no to, they were the only political party that said no to this. Nobody else. The Tories, silence. Labour, silence. Liberal, silence. There's the Lib-Lag Compact. So they were the only ones to challenge it. So, if anybody wants to get in and support, that's our only political solution at the moment. There isn't another one unless someone wants to make a political solution. That she was saying in terms that the topping out was 2020. Well, that's now. And they wanted it fully operational, i.e. ready to go to war in 2025. And she then stated that the context of which, whilst the NATO thing was important, and they've tried to rope it in, well, of course it's important because that involves Britain's membership of NATO, i.e. then links to America. And then, of course, you've got the nuclear capability with our Trident, which is obviously the warheads are American. So although the boats are ours, the warheads are American, right? There's this double-edged problem of if Trump says no to any of this on the basis that the American nuclear IP does not drift into Europe under effectively EU control, which I strongly suspect that will happen. It's not just a question of Germany with the money; it's a question of the big ticket items and these big policy issues. And of course, if you wanted to pull America into a European theatre, you could do it off the back of Britain's shirt-tailed membership of NATO. And this is something Lord James of Blackheath has been warning of for quite some time, openly. And he had real serious trouble getting this articulated on his feet in the House of Lords. And there was questions submitted, and he did talk about it, and he got a hell of a lot of whiplash for some very interesting people. But that's the direction of travel. She wants to top out in 2025. But in the same conversation, she was talking about Africa. And if you look on the EU neighbourhood map, you'll see that the eastern borders right up to Russia all come into the EU neighbourhood, as well as the entire Sahel region in Africa. And she's obviously said straight away, well, the EU can and would and should go into Africa, but NATO doesn't. This is not an area NATO is involved with. but you know, we should go in there. In effect, I'm paraphrasing, but you know, that's
Yeah,
what he was saying
yeah.
to everyone. We should arm up. We should have our own capability. That's what Tony Blair said in Munich. We want our own capability. When he said our, he didn't mean British. He meant European.
Yes.
And that means we make our own.
Now, I find it difficult to see that the senior officers, so CDS, CGS, the colonels and the brigadiers that are out there in the field army, I find it quite difficult to believe that they actually going along with this and signing off on it. So this definitely looks like a shadow government type thing, doesn't it? With the civil servants, which is something that Churchill warned us of in 1945, wasn't it?
Yeah. Are we
only in June of 1945. So shortly after the Second World War ended in Europe. So if I play that video clip now, and we can see what he has to say, because it seems like history again is repeating itself.
Socialism is in its essence an attack not only upon British enterprise, but upon the right of an ordinary man or woman to breathe freely without having a harsh, clumsy, tyrannical hand clapped across their mouths and nostrils. A free parliament. Look at that. A free parliament is odious to the socialist doctrinaire. Have we not heard Mr. Herbert Morrison descant upon his plans to curtail parliamentary procedure and pass laws simply by resolutions of broad principle in the House of Commons, afterwards to be left by Parliament to the executive and to the bureaucrats to elaborate and enforce by departmental regulations? As for Sir Stafford Cripps on Parliament in the socialist state, I have not time to read you what it said, but perhaps it will meet the public eye during the election campaign. But I will go farther. I declare to you from the bottom of my heart that no socialist system can be established without a political police. Many of those who are advocating socialism or voting socialist today will be horrified at this idea. That is because they are short-sighted. That is because they do not see where their theories are leading us. No socialist government conducting the entire life and industry of the country could afford to allow free, sharp, or violently worded expressions of public discontent. They would have to fall back on some form of Gestapo, no doubt very humanely directed in the first instance. And this would nip in the bud opinion and its forms. It would stop criticism and it reared its head. And it would gather all the power to the Supreme Party and the party leaders rising like stately pinnacles above their vast bureaucracies of civil servants. No longer servants and no longer civil.
Well, isn't that true? That they're no longer servants and they're no longer civil, because they're just directing everything and doing pretty much as they please. But as a result of that, they're risking the security of our own air, land and sea defences. So, and didn't Admiral Chris Parry move on to that from there and more or less say the same thing recently?
Well, it's been interesting since David Scott and I got this last week and pushed it out. The background to sort of resurrecting this revelation from Churchill, and let's call it what it is: the absolute, deadly accurate strategic forecast from somebody that knew from World War I and World War II all of the secret, top secret and most secret paperwork, not just from Britain and Europe, but globally, what was going on, what the intentions of, let's say, the left, but if you said from socialism to Marxism to communism, which is the ultimate destination, what was going to happen. And he got a lot of whiplash at this at the time in 45 when he was standing for election. And I think he got a dose of real serious pushback from the enemy at the time. And it was like, oh no, we don't want you taking power again. You might keep Britain in a free sort of in free sort of
perpetual warfare, really.
Well, yeah. Well, if you think about it, look what he was talking about there in 2 minutes. He articulates exactly the situation in Britain right here and now today.
Yeah.
And we've got to face up to this fact. That's the most important thing. No more whinging. We've got to face up to the fact that we have got a proper fight on our hands, because this is the score. All right. He was talking about, I mean, that opening sentence to breathe freely. Yeah. Without the tyrannical hand crashing across your mouth and nostrils. Wow, is that of the now or what? You know, I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than this, Winston. The political police. Well, that's where we are as well. That's exactly where we are. They're enforcing this diktat law that we're now seeing. When he's talking about no longer a free parliament, look how they're making our laws now. Look how Parliament isn't functioning, how democracy has failed because of that.
It's all being done behind the closed doors now, as we know.
It's being done in the Cabinet Office. Now, the executive, the power, is in the Cabinet Office. This is exactly what he was talking about. Yeah. This is what's going to happen, and it is happening.
Yeah, and we all know that laws cannot be passed unless you have all 650 MPs in the House of Commons listening to the proposed new law, and then it gets passed between those and the House of Lords X amount of times until
the number threshold isn't the critical thing. It's just the fact that it goes through the House. Yeah. So there might only be, I don't know, a handful of them in there. And of course, we're in a situation now where it's not a full House because of this COVID thing. And you know, the executive's romping away with it because not even there's no visitors allowed. So I've got
and the civil servants who we suspect now of, if you like.
Well, the civil servants are the government. The power is resting with them.
Yes.
The ministers have handed over.
Yeah.
There's been a handover. Don't ask me when, but that's clearly where we are in the here and now. The likes of Ben Wallace are not running. All he's doing is to get. Oh, thank you, Stephen. Oh, right. Okay. Shall I read this? All right. Thank you. All right. Anything? You know, this is where we are. The ministers aren't ministers anymore. Last time we had any ministerial clout was under Thatcher, I think. Now, I'm not endorsing all what she did because a lot of it she got wrong, but she did get some of it right. But I've got to say for everyone, this is probably the most important Churchill speech ever, where we're concerned in the here and now. Just tells everyone what you know. This is what the left is going to do, how they're going to do it, and what the impacts are in a very sort of 5 or 6 bits. So it cannot be understated. You know, please, everyone, get out there, start talking about this, and let's face it up.
He was basically talking for the first time in a long time. He was talking peacetime politics during that Gestapo speech, wasn't
he? Yeah.
Compared to all the years prior, where he was talking wartime politics.
I mean, it's interesting how you get this kind of from the physical battle to then the political battle. How it's just it really is. I mean, we were looking for it because I knew he'd sort of spoken on this subject, and I knew he had trouble with some of the stuff the Attlee government had done, and then found it difficult to undo it, and a lot of it because it was defence related. Yes. When David Scott dragged, we were discussing it. I said, well, hang on a minute. We need to go and find this speech. We found it quite quickly and wow, this is one they don't want you to hear, isn't it? They don't want you to. We get all the other famous ones, obviously, and rightly so. But this really is the one that kind of nails it hits the socialist, communist, Marxist nail right on the head. This is what it's going to do. And this is what's going to happen. And the people, and I think the really important thing is he's saying that the people that think this is a good idea are short-sighted and they don't realise where this is going in an ultimate destination. Because, a lot of us are working people. We probably thought that some of the Labour stuff was a good idea, but not realising what the full impact was going to be.
Right, moving on to sort of slightly more recent. We've got a little clip now from Admiral Chris Parry, who talks about borders and our ability to protect our borders, which ties in quite nicely,
doesn't it?
Well, it was one of the risks I highlighted in 2006 when I was responsible for future blue skies thinking for government departments. And what we forecast was an age of migrations, in fact, and frankly, this is the tip of the iceberg. I think as we go into the next 10 to 15 years, this problem is just going to be worse and worse as regimes fail and become flailing states, as we have superpower competition and things like that. We'll also have natural disasters and climate change. So there's going to be a lot of people on the move in the next 10 to 15 years. So if we don't get our external borders policy right and we don't get our migration policies right, then we're going to have destabilizing levels of migration, which some countries won't be able to cope with. It'll be a case of exogenous shock. So I think now is a really good time for us to sort out how we regulate not just our national borders, but the external borders policy of Europe itself. I think people have to decide how many people they want in their countries, what they can cope with, their infrastructures and things like that. And what we have to do is say, look, we have to have a defined policy in relation to what is a migrant and what is an asylum seeker. Otherwise, some of our infrastructures, some of our societies will be overwhelmed, and that is the lesson of history.
So you actually think that rather than making it easier for refugees to come to this country, the government is right to be seeking to strengthen its borders, particularly as we leave the European Union, which of course changes the rights of people coming from the EU to this country?
I think that we have to have some fairly good rules. I agree with Steve about this. Is we've got to have controlled ways of actually granting people asylum and regulating the migration, because it cannot be open to everybody. I don't think any society can cope with that. But that must include a well-regulated, safe, secure border. And right now we don't have a safe, secure maritime border. And mainly that's because we're not in control of our offshore zone. We have about 6 different agencies responsible for it. And I hope that as we get towards the end of the year, that we'll have a growth.
How about that little revelation? Should we go backwards? We do not. So this is from the top guy. Trust this guy.
Yeah.
The truth. Okay. He knows what's what. Falklands vet, Rear Admiral, done some very interesting jobs, one of which being director at the MOD. We do not control our offshore zone. Okay. I'm going to rely on what he's telling me because this guy's done it for a job. So I'm fine with that. Okay. That's where we are. We do not have a safe or secure maritime border. Okay. And he wrote a paper in 2006, government paper, as a strategic forecast of what was going to happen with migration from these regions that we're talking about in Africa and Arabia and Eastern Europe and all the rest of it. Telling everyone what was going to go on and why. Now, obviously, he basically said in there because superpower competition. So the regions are being destabilized. So that's China, the EU, and anybody else that wants to come in. Russia, who knows, whatever. So their region's being destabilized by superpower competition. Okay. Well, the EU wants to be a superpower. And this is not a case, everyone, of it being, oh, crikey, we didn't know. We had no idea. Now, hang on a minute. There was a government paper and you were told what was going to be happening in migration because the guy strategically forecast the whole thing, top to bottom. Now, so there's a bit of a conversation developed off the back of this because Tony Blair has been involved. Okay, everyone, alarm bells. And apparently what happened with Chris's strategic forecast is it got reamed out by Blair's minions, and then the correct data was then adopted, not Chris's, the correct, do you get that, everyone? The correct data. So this isn't a question of it being a mistake and all this happening in the channel. You know, the government are fully aware This is a conscious decision. And our ministers are not clearly doing anything, because, you know, you would then start to get into the real sweet spot of this. Well, who's the government? This is where, you know, what we were talking about earlier with the executive and what Churchill's warned us all about, and how the civil servants are no longer civil and no longer servant.
They're ruling over us, if you could say.
I've tried to say this to Nigel Farage, you know, this is not a mistake. This is a conscious decision. This is government policy. Let them in. Take them for a trip round Anfield, you know, and 4-star hotels. And hopefully they'll all get on their phones and tell everyone, you know, back home what a great thing it's. No one, wow, the numbers are going up. Crikey. This is a conscious decision. And what Chris is talking about there is tip of the iceberg. So this is the important stuff now. Tip of the iceberg. If you think it's bad now, he's talking about levels of future migration that will get to a point where the nation that's having the migration come into it will be destabilized. So we'll have more problems unless the policy is adopted. You know, and that's the key point that he finished on there, that a conversation at the end of the year where the policy is adopted. But we're going to need a government with some backbone and some nous and some ministers that are prepared to stand up and go, no. Or, well, we'll have a few, and this is what we want, and this is what we don't want to do, and this is what we will do. This is what our parameters are. But at the moment, it's free for all.
Agreed. Yeah. So that's our target, really, is the civil service. That's who we have to keep.
Well, I think it's a double-ended approach, isn't it? We've got to get the MPs and the backbenchers and the ministers to start acting like a government. And they have got to tell the Cabinet Office what's what. All right? Because at the moment, our democratic process has really failed. It's dwindling. Lights going out. Because our sovereignty that we entrust to the MPs to form a government in Her Majesty's name, it's not working. Because the policy and the diktats, as Churchill warned of, and how the executive would do it, within the cabinet, isn't listening, not interested. Whatever, you know, we see this week after week with Priti Patel and this ping pong between Farage and Priti Patel and the mainstream press. Has anything actually happened yet?
Nothing.
Anyone? Has anything happened?
Absolutely nothing, Dave. Absolutely nothing.
What's happened is the numbers are going up, as Nigel is correctly telling us. You know, yes, they are, and this is the score.
Everybody's panicking about the COVID-19, and Priti Patel was asked only 3 or 4 weeks ago, you know, what are the figures of people coming into the UK, migrants carrying the COVID-19 virus, whatever it is. She couldn't even come up with a figure. She kept referring back to the March 29th figure, which was the figure that was handed to her by Mark Sedwill at the time.
Well, I mean, you know, they're being led and fed, aren't they? They're being led and fed, and they're not. You know, it's all become completely wishy-washy, isn't it?
Like as soon as they have to go off piste with their script, you can see it in their faces. As soon as somebody takes them off piste, they've lost it.
We've seen this, and you know, and I mean, look, your issue could be the NHS, or you know, or social services, or law, or the country, whatever your issue is. But I'll bring it back to defence because it's what I know. All right, we've done the letter writing on a national campaign. We fielded it back in, and we've looked at it. And we get a government template letter. It doesn't matter who the MP is. It doesn't matter. You know, each individual person could go in and go, well, I don't like Defence Union, and I don't want it to happen, or whatever. Or you know, or there could be a really firm letter. But whatever that is, some sort of no, my MP, and we get this government template letter back. So what does that tell us? That the MPs are not taking any notice. They're not reading it. They're unaware of it. You know, I mean, okay, we're starting another campaign. There's another campaign just started where we want to field these letters back in to see what the new what the new replies are going to be. So we were going with a gambit of, so this is to your MP, do you know about Defence Union? Just a simple question, do you know about Defence Union? Are you in favour of it? Question 2. If you're in favour of it, have you made an open statement? Where's that? If you're not in favour of it, what are you doing about it? So it's really simple. We're just trying to sort of get them to sort of, start even functioning as sort of, because I think what they're doing at the moment is they're being led from CCHQ. CCHQ just gets a government template letter. It's not even party policy. That's gone. Forget that. And the Commons Library, even if one does want to go and look at it, the information in the Commons Library comes from the Cabinet Office. So if the MP thinks, I want to go and do some research because I'm I'm going to do a good job, and off they trot to the Commons Library to go and suss out what's going on, they get Cabinet Office tosh. They don't get the real stuff, and then we know, because we've got sources in there, that the ministers aren't being given the correct information anyway. So how could they make a proper decision? Because the ministers are not getting really the proper score from the civil servants, who are clearly no longer civil or servant. Churchill has told us. So you're in this problem without them going, right, well, just whoa, I don't like what it is, and I'm not interested with what you say anymore. This has got to stop, and I'm not signing off on it. Because what's happening is, of course, the ministers are signing off on all this stuff. Priti Patel, whatever way you want to put it to, and I agree with Nigel on this, she's signing off on this.
Now, obviously, this past weekend, we've had a big thing in Nottingham, which was all about veterans, children's welfare, was really the crux of it. We had about 2,000 plus people turn out. Promises were made by Nottinghamshire Police that we wouldn't be kettled in, that we'd be able to march off approximately a mile to the Market Square in Nottingham and do speeches, and then march back to the BBC and disperse. Well, those promises were broken. We had police brought in from Wales and Manchester and Peterborough and Derbyshire and London. So Nottinghamshire Police and the police liaison team from Nottingham were great, but all those drafted in, unfortunately, were not. They were using completely different tactics that were coming from up high. Now, here's an example of how they kettled us in at the statue and prevented us from doing the speeches where we wanted to do them. Now, as you can see there, it's just veterans stood there with 2 and 3 deep police officers. And if you look at the guy nearest in the blue tabard or waistcoat, he's Headloo on his hat, so he's Welsh police. And when you take a closer look at the others in other photos that have come out, you can see that they're Met Police, etc., etc., etc. And they had a totally different idea of policing the situation than the Nottinghamshire Police, who were, must be admitted, were 100% on side all the way through. And Dean was in close contact with the police liaison team for 2 to 3 weeks prior to the event. And they actually apologised after the event to say, sorry you couldn't do what you wanted to do, even though it looks as though it's worked out better. Now, again, is history repeated into a video that we have here?
Just hold on, Simon. Don't play that just yet. Just everyone look at that photo. Those coppers have got battens drawn. Okay. Yeah. Battens are out. They are ready to strike.
Hello.
Now, you were there, so as someone, was there any notion of aggravation or somebody going to do something daft or breach the peace in front of those coppers?
At that point, when they kettled us in, there was no notion of anything happening whatsoever. They had barriers up. As soon as they got us into a crescent, if you like, of King Street and Queen Street, they then put a manned wall up behind us so we couldn't even get back out. And then after a while, Antifa, who were given our piece of ground, circled round, came in behind us. So suddenly we were in a position of threat.
Yeah, wonderful.
And we decided to break out at that time. And we knew, because they were identified at the time by some, and they were identified in video afterwards, that people that were creating a bit of agitation, let's say, with the police, were undercover police with earphones in, shirts. One was seen getting out the police van just prior to creating the agitation. And then the police swung a couple of batons. One veteran was hit over the top of the head.
Yeah, I saw that.
Active Patriot was hit. Somebody was hit in the arm and somebody else in the leg. So there were a few injuries.
You're describing a stitch-up, aren't you? You're describing a stitch-up and a situation where it could have got violent very easily.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah,
and this ought to let everybody know this is the levels that you're at with this. And let's draw it back to what Churchill said. That you go along this socialist, Marxist, communist path that's been going on in Britain now for 75 years, give or take. Let's take the 5 years out that we had a Churchill the second time round. Let's say it's 70 years. All right, maybe a little bit under Thatcher, but the rest of it proper wobbly, shall we say? And we've now got political police. We have got what Churchill forecast, and I think this is what's demonstrated there by what's happened to you guys at the weekend. All right, now let's play the other video.
So this video is of the coal miners' strike in 1984. I think this was taken.
The 5,000 pickets with thousands of their own forces.
Mounted, will you withdraw, please?
At first, police horses tried to shepherd the miners out of the convoy road. The violence reached a new peak as miners surged forward against the riot shields. Policemen fought with truncheons under a barrage of stones and missiles. By mid-morning, the picketing had turned to rioting. The police hadn't lost ground, but more riot squads were needed as reinforcements in the front line as the pressure increased. Eventually, senior officers ordered in the mounted police to disperse the miners. A gap opened and the horses galloped in. Police horses are the most feared weapon in the present armoury. But it's the riot squads that follow up to make the arrests. And today, on the fields around Orgreave, the police became involved in some of the most vicious hand-to-hand fighting of the entire miners' dispute. The attacks on individual policemen were horrific. The police commanders said it was a marvel that no one was killed. The battle lasted throughout the morning, and in all, police made over 100 arrests as the scuffles ebbed and flowed. At all times, the police were in control, but under tremendous pressure. There was never anything peaceful about the frontline confrontation. It appeared to be a conscious decision to use any method to stop the coke lorries. By late afternoon, Rotherham Hospital had handled 63 patients, pickets and policemen, but only 4 had been detained, one of them Arthur Scargill, the miners' president. He'd been using a two-way radio to keep in touch with the pickets. Mr. Scargill claimed he'd been knocked down by a police riot shield.
He fell from that bank, slipped more than fell, and his back sort of hit the ground and the back of his head hit what I think is an old railway sleeper.
Mr. Scargill says that he was hit by a riot shield from behind.
He wasn't near a riot shield. The riot shields were on the road, and Arthur Scargill, together with 2 other men, who I can identify, were on the bank to the left of that road. They were 5 or 6 feet above the road.
But the rioting continued despite the injuries and arrests. Whole roadways were strewn with the debris of demolished stone walls. A burning barricade had been built against the police horses. But the 2 convoys still got away unmolested behind the vigilant guard of a huge body of weary policemen.
With the miners' strike now 100 days old, one financial analysis suggests that it's costing more than double the government's unofficial estimate.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to brass tacks. So they were arguing about coal, the production of British coal. with a British labour force. And the first thing that the EU did, of course, was wanted to take control of coal and steel. And once it had done that, it then moved on. So those poor guys there, passionate people, miners, known a lot through rugby clubs. Well, they didn't want to give up, did they? They wanted to carry on what they were doing. And look what the government did to them. It sent in the cavalry. Okay, so we'll bear that in mind. Now, the steel workers weren't as organised or passionate as the coal miners. They didn't put up a fight. So what you're witnessing there is those coal miners trying to put up a fight and keep their jobs and keep their communities. Now, the car workers, that strikes and whatnot, nothing really effective. And we can keep going from cars to railway to shipping to whatever other stuff. Now, the way I see it at the minute, the last line in this country are the veterans. Now, this is where it gets back to that bit where they send the cavalry in. Now, of course, if you sent cavalry into veterans that were protesting, Simon, I'm going to come back to you on this, what would happen?
I would say the police would like us just to surrender straight away because we're good law-abiding citizens. But I think things are getting to such a stage now that if they charged us with cavalry horse, we would retaliate. And
would you form a square?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Now you see the miners.
A solid square, all-round defence.
The miners, God bless them. And these are the guys that kept the home fires burning through 2 world wars. And then the government does that to them.
Yep. Yep.
Let nobody be under any misapprehension.
And it's worthy a note on there as well that those coal miners were peaceful. They were protesting. They were just peaceful protest. It wasn't until the police started interfering, pushing them back, getting heavy-handed, and then having to bring in the heavy horse, that any real violence broke out. And that's when the curbstones were being lifted out and broken up and thrown at the police as a form of defence, I would like to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, those guys were stitched up by their own socialist unions. Scargill was completely ineffective. I mean, there's an argument that you could turn around and say, well, actually, he would made it worse. But the point of the matter is, of course, is that what I'm trying to sort of put over is that those guys had camaraderie.
Yes.
They worked together. They were hard men. All right? And all we were arguing about was carrying on digging coal. Now, let's talk about an argument now then about carrying on building a tank, or carrying on building an aircraft, or carrying on building a frigate. I'm going to come back to this because this is quite important now we've got back to that, and I've missed it when we did the Parry thing. So currently, the new tranche of frigates and corvettes, Type 31 or whatever else is, Type whatever else are in process, are partly going to be partly done on a split, so a pan-EU basis, again, here we go. Alarm bells, everyone, between Babcock and Krups. Okay. Now, nobody in government tell me what's happening with these T-31s, whether they're being built, not built, or whatever. There's some sort of, doesn't look good. If somebody would like to tell me what's going on, I'd be most grateful. But we're into this same syndrome as what we were with the tank thing. I can see a situation coming up here pretty quickly where the carpet's pulled out from Babcock's rapidly and we're not building any of it. And we won't be building a ship, because don't forget, currently we have still built ships in this country, warships. So there's the EU and the military the industrial unification coming in right towards us right now. We've got the same repeat pattern as what we've had with Rheinmetall and the tanks, as what we've got with Babcock and Krups and the T-32 Corvette frigates. So it's exactly the same thing. So, you know, we've got real trouble.
I think we've got a fight on our hands, David. And it's a fight, I think, that everybody in the nation now, or pretty much everybody in the nation, any right-thinking person in the nation that's not far left will take up. Because I think you could see it Saturday. Everybody's had an absolute gutful.
Yeah. The general public are fed up.
Yeah.
But our issue, of course, is there isn't currently a political solution being offered by the current Conservative government. And I'm going to come back to, we come back to the fact that the exec is running away with it in the Cabinet Office. The government's in there. And I've got to say that, on some of the senior officers that I've met and lobbied, one of them was under no illusion, because he'd seen it from running Trident, that there was a Lib-Lab compact not to talk about defence. On any level, just shut up. Right, you don't talk about it, we won't talk about it. They'd effectively got political détente, which of course has allowed over these decades for our military and our defence industry to be dismantled. Look, we're not at the point we are, we're not at the point where with defence in this country where we've ended up with the car industry and the steel industry and the coal industry, but we are close to it. So this is a margin call to everyone now, all right? It's happening. We've got to face up to it. We now know what the problem is. We now know where the problem is, and we have to push for a political solution. And the reason that I said to Simon to put that clip up about the miners and them sending the cavalry in to smash them up, all right, is because the street solution could ultimately end up in that arena. And it's really important that the veterans as a whole and the veterans' friends and family understand what it is that they're dealing with.
Very good point. Very good point.
Modern all means hybrid warfare is here. We had the army chief, Carlton Smith, saying that peace and war no longer existed. Those binary states did not exist anymore. We were in a state of perpetual warfare. And that's civilian as well as it is external. It's internal as much as it is external. And of course, who does this shoot? And I've got to say, when Dennis Hutchins and I, when we did an interview on my Dave Ellis show, I said to him, okay, then Dennis, who does this suit? If we carry on with this EU defence union, who does it suit? Well, he said, it certainly doesn't suit us. I said, well, who does it suit? He said, well, it probably suit Russia.
You mentioned in hybrid warfare there, one of the tentacles, as we know, of hybrid warfare is irregular warfare.
Yeah.
And that includes getting somebody else's army or a mercenary force to fight on your behalf, which gives you deniability.
Anybody that's been,
and they did that exact thing on Saturday by bringing in police forces from other areas. They did all the heavy-handed work, let's say, and that provides Nottingham with that deniability. We handled everything superbly well. It was them. It was the Welsh police. It was the Met. It was them that came in from Derbyshire.
Well, there's, where are the orders coming from? What are their instructions? Yeah. I mean, we saw this at the Cenotaph when Dean and the Grenadier Guards were out there. We saw all the
That's right.
We've had all the debrief. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that our tactics and strategy have got to accept some of this stuff. That this is nasty. It is dangerous, and the way we go about trying to get a resolution to this has got to be very carefully thought about, and fundamentally, it's got this unity that you spoke of. That there's got to be unity within the whole of the veterans community. It can't be an issue of people reverting to type, whether they're a bootneck, a navy, or a whatever. It's just got to be all one lot, and we've all got to start getting to grips with this. and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There's a group that have formed in Parliament. It's called the Veterans Support Group. All right, and if we're going to try and forge a political solution to this, that is our best chance of pushing on and trying to get something done. You know, if Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party want to come along with that, great, more the merrier. But you know, let's not be under any illusion here. You know, the task is immense, but at least let's face up to it.
100%. Step up to the plate. Do you reckon we're going to be in the Cabinet Office again tomorrow, David?
Well, I was reliably informed when we used to do our tweet barrages last year that they were having crisis meetings about it. So
That's right.
Say, you know, look, they're not all bad. It's not, you know, you can't say they're all bad. You know, we're getting a lot of people blow the whistle now.
Yeah,
we need more. We need more of that. But of course, we've got to show some leadership and show some, you know, start actually talking about some solutions to this problem. As awful as the problem is, we've got to start talking about solutions and offering solutions. There you go.
That sums us up, mate, doesn't it?
Yeah, doesn't it? Right. Are we done?
Right, David. We've been running there for over an hour and
That's
7
long enough.
minutes there.
Okay.
Thanks ever so much, David, for coming on board tonight and giving us your insights. You're well up to speed with all this and the amount of work that you've done in the past with House of Commons, House of Lords, the Ministry of Defence, etc. So you were the absolute perfect man to bring on board with that article that came up this morning in the Daily Mail. So thanks ever so much, brother. I'll be in contact with you as always during the rest of this week.
Well, there's bound to be something else pop up in a day or two. Yeah.
There'll be something tomorrow. You know, you can guarantee mine and your name will be mentioned again somewhere in London, and that will spark us off again. Because the more they sort of bring us up, the more we sort of want to do that. Really, isn't it? So,
yeah. Well, we've got to get out there. Get those letters going into your MPs, everyone. Don't email. Write a letter. Put it in the post. Get some simple questions in. Get the reply. Don't let them off. Tell them you want an answer in 14 days. Once you've got the reply, let's start talking about the replies that we get. Share the replies from your MP on social media, and let's see if we can actually press on and get them to do their job.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Love you all loads. Don't suffer in silence. If you need us, somebody's here for you. You know that. This call sign is out.